Hello, welcome everyone. This is Charlene of Angel Hack, the organizing team of the Hello Future Hackathons, and we are excited to welcome you once again to our sixth workshop of the Hedera Hello Future Apex Hackathon, which runs from 17th of February until 23rd of March. And we're now on week 3 of the hacking period, and this is one of our back-to-back workshop weeks. Keep up the great work, everyone, and let's focus on creating high-quality projects that can catch the attention of Hedera and its ecosystem partners. All right. So with a prize pool of 250,000 and such a strong ecosystem support, it's no wonder that the Apex Hackathon became one of the most anticipated Hedera hackathons of 2026. And we are all excited to see the amazing projects you'll create. But of course, it's not just about the prizes. This hackathon is powered by an incredible lineup of partners, including AWS, Neuron, Hashgraph Online, Bonzo, and Hiero, all bringing their expertise and support to help you build something truly impactful. Now, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce today's speaker and mentor, Daniel from Hashgraph. Daniel's focus is on sustainability, so his workshop entitled Delivering Trust in Environmental Ethics and Outcomes with Hedera Guardian will highlight sustainability in practice. Hi, Daniel. All right. So what makes this session especially unique, at least for Apex, is that you will see collaborators later working together live with Daniel and Neuron. So you're welcome to follow along, of course, but most importantly, let's give our full attention to Daniel and the team as they present and collaborate in real time. So for any questions and follow-up, please feel free to ask here, ask the question on the live chat, and then we will tackle it later if time permits, okay? And if your question come later, that's completely fine. Please fill out the form that I'm about to share on the chat right now. And of course, as I would always say, the easiest way to collaborate, to contact your mentors is through our Discord. Okay, let me just paste it here. This form is somewhere that you can paste your questions if it comes later. But if your question is already available within this workshop, then please feel free to put your questions live. All right, now I'll hand things over to Daniel to kick off the workshop. Daniel, the stage is yours. Take it away.
Hi, thank you so much, Sherlyn, for that warm introduction, and welcome everybody to this workshop around wildfires, mitigation finance, and delivering trust in digital environmental assets with the Hedera Guardian. I only recently joined the Hashgraph team, and so I have been going through an onboarding journey, learning about the Hedera Guardian, and I've invited a number of guests to join me today. And I just want to welcome everybody who joined to learn a little bit more about the Hedera Guardian. Yeah, hey there, Karen. Nice to see you. Do you want to say hello for a moment?
Sorry, just get my mic off mute. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Hardy. I'm the founder of Naturewired. And we've been on the Hedera Guardian journey for about a year now, learning about the ecosystem partners and the benefits of digitized nature projects and connecting those to corporations. So thank you, Daniel, for hosting this today.
You're welcome, Karen. I think what I'll do is I'll just give a little bit of an overview first, and then we can jump in and do a quick round of intros. You can see my shared screen, everybody. Does that work? Is that true? Yeah. So just a short overview of what we'll cover today. We'll do a quick activity like a warm-up just to kind of get our brains moving, and as well as do an overview of the Hedera Guardian and what digital environmental assets are, and then we'll do an activity around wildfires and mitigation finance, inspired by an event that I attended a couple months ago. And as I went to that event hosted by Conservation X Labs, I learned a lot about wildfire and mitigation finance, and I thought that the Hedera platform and the Guardian could actually be interesting platform to address this, although nothing like that has been developed yet. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I want to just as a quick overview, today, this hackathon is in progress, as Sherlyn mentioned, but there are 2 other hackathons later this year, one in July and one in October. So the Guardian is quite a complex platform. So today, together with all of you, I hope we'll have some conversations around understanding the Guardian. As I've been on my own journey to understand the Guardian, I want to bring you along with that as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a link in the chat. And if you could just join me on the mural. Can everyone see the chat link there? Or the mural link in the group chat?
Yep, it's just coming up.
Okay, great.
I assume we enter as a visitor.
Great, I'll just bring everybody to this section on the board here. So once you join, go ahead and just add your name and your organization to one of these sticky notes here, and we'll just to kind of get warmed up and just make sure everybody can use the tool. And if you just double click on those sticky notes there, it should work for you. Awesome. So everybody else managed to get in there? There you go. Thanks so much, Tika. And then after you've added your name, why don't you go ahead and just drag that blue sticky note over one of the images here that grabs your attention. Sorry, no, I'll bring him forward. Eduardo, I see you dropped it over this image of a meadow there. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly and maybe share why you chose this image?
Yes. Well, again, Eduardo Gonzalez. I am the founder of Greenbox. Greenbox, well, basically we are doing 2 things, but today I guess we are going to be focused on what we are trying to do is to use different technologies to streamline the data transmission when we are trying to monitor and protect, let's say, all type of tropical environments, okay? So if you think about the way that today we are doing monitoring, you send people with a bunch of trial cams by acoustic devices, you install that, and you come later 2 or 3 months later, and you discover that half of the equipment are not there, some are broken, etc. So the idea here is let's use real-time or near real-time technologies in order to streamline as much data you can from let's say the Amazon, mangrove, etc. With the idea that we better protect it and we just another type of technologies. This is very interesting, I think, considering this meeting, because we can also help on the wildfire detection and managing there because of the near real-time data. So I can talk a little bit more about that, but maybe later.
Yeah, thanks for that brief intro, Eduardo. It's good to see you again. Yeah, we'll be talking about the data streams soon, and it sounds like there's a good overlap with your company around this. Tika, do you want to say hello for a minute and where you're calling in from?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
I'm calling from Lake Tahoe. So that image struck me. There's a lot of, there was a huge wetland issue in South Lake that was filled in, and now it's being restored with a lot of input from Indigenous leaders in the area. So that's been nice to see in Tahoe. I am currently working as a kind of freelance consultant, but worked with Regen Network for 4.5 years. They built on the Cosmos SDK system for blockchain, so have a lot of experience with digitizing environmental claims. And also living in Tahoe. The image above was the other one that struck me. So very involved in community managed wildfire mitigation efforts with things like forming Firewise communities and just being involved in citizen climate lobby and understanding policy around this. And there's a lot of good efforts going on. Vibrant Planet and Blue Forest. So yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for the invite, Daniel.
Yeah, you're welcome. You mentioned a few names that I think I'll be touching upon shortly. And some of these actually are, I think, from kind of some area. Well, yeah, I think this image here is from Lassen over here.
Yeah, I was glad to hear you connected with Conservation X too. I was hoping to get to that meeting in Oakland, but they're doing some really cool work on wildfires.
Yeah, they sure are. And we'll talk about that shortly. Well, let's see. How about Carolyn? Carolyn, how are you? I haven't seen you in quite some time. How are you doing? Where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling from Kenya, and we do large-scale reforestation projects for communities that are in arid and semi-arid lands. Mostly work in 3 main ecosystems: mangrove ecosystems, agroforestry systems, and also in woodlands.
I didn't see your name on here, so I assume maybe you would put your note over the mangroves and with these types of ecosystems.
Yeah, I was trying to see because my communities intersect different ecosystems, so I was just trying to see where to fit. I don't know if I'm allowed to put in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, you can.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, you can also add more than one. Well, the next question I wanted to ask is basically like, as you look at these different ecosystems, what values might these environments provide? Just as a brief warm up, if you can double click on any one of these green stickiness and just drag it over the images that you see here. We have a couple different types of images here. Mental health, I like that. Yeah, I can see, there's some ecotourism on this kind of, this is actually like an Airbnb here near my area in Occidental here, just to be 10 miles from where I am. And this is a forest here that's definitely been thinned out. You can see there's a lot of space and grasslands here. Natural filtration for the mangrove ecosystem and for these beautiful creeks in this meadow here. Food security is another benefit that nature provides. Yeah, does anybody want to mention anything? How about this farm over here? Does anyone want to say anything about what a farm might, what a regenerative farm might provide?
Yes, I can jump on that one, if you don't mind. Well, I said that the green box was one leg, technology. The second leg is more on the financial. We have a financial framework, and I just made a post, which I just put in one of the pictures, but I would like to put the same message all over the pictures. And my point is that if we treat nature as a critical infrastructure, all of these pictures, they will generate different type of economical values. And if we use that economical value, we can, well, first protect it and move from conservation to really having a positive impact in all of these, with all these activities.
Right, exactly. So how do we then move? So like another thing to think about, right, is there's all these assets or all these benefits that these natural habitats, all that nature itself provides, right? But then there's also, like, if you think about it from another point of view, there's things that can create risks or liabilities with these assets. Can you think of maybe what are the challenges with managing and stewarding some of these ecosystems? You could think of these as like pressures, because there's a lot of competing pressures when you have these ecosystems, right? Yeah, I see someone put fire here, which is something we're going to talk about in a moment. And so when you look at this, house, or this, property that's here, like in this dense forest here, thick underbrush can create risk of wildfires and can create risk. So like an insurer might not be so happy about this environment. They may look at this as a risk or a mitigation or like a liability to build so close to the trees like this. So they may have trouble to secure insurance. There may be pressures on the farm from things like to convert the land use to something different, right? Like maybe housing. Mangroves provide so many benefits, like storm surge protection and carbon sequestration, but there are also pressures like, to build along shorelines for, let's say, hospitality or tourism that may not value these. So with that, I want to move now and talk a little bit about, get into some more concepts around the Guardian and environmental assets. So I'm going to invite everyone to follow me here on the board. So the Guardian itself, I'm going to start from a very high level, okay? Because the Guardian does many things. Have any of you been familiar with the Guardian or looked at it? I know, Karen, you have, but has anyone else looked at it, or how familiar are you? Not so much, Eduardo, no. You've had some experience with Regen Network and Web3 in general. And I was actually out at Regen Network many years ago as well. So I have some experience there. But yeah, there's definitely an overlap with Web3 here. And Carolyn, I know you have some experience also with Web3. So as a high level overview, the Guardian is basically an open source platform that manages the life cycle of digital environmental assets. And some of the high level features that it includes are, it has decentralized identities, verifiable credentials, which are W3C standards. It has a comprehensive policy workflow engine. It integrates with the Hedera token service. You can integrate it with digital MRV for real-time updates. It's fully open source, and there's a methodology library of which others have digitized methodologies that you can draw upon and learn from. So at a high level, you can see this is like the DMRV, and Eduardo, you mentioned this briefly. This kind of can feed into the Guardian, and data can be collected. Policies can then be authored there to actually automate the token minting processes or retirements. It's quite flexible because you can author these methodologies so that you can completely automate these workflows. And then everything gets written to the Hedera ledger so that you have this proof of record and verifiable credentials or verifiable presentation of the data. And we'll look at an example in a little bit. But to think about this briefly, like, I'm curious, just after we've mentioned digital environmental assets, like, what are some things that come to mind when you think of digital environmental assets? I know that's a very big question, but I'm curious what you all think about when you think about this.
Did you want us to put it in the stickies, Daniel?
Yeah, go right ahead. And Carolyn, I see you're locked out of Mural. If you refresh the board, perhaps. Oh, actually, I think I know what it is. Carolyn, I'll get you in there in just a moment. Carolyn, if you try and refresh now, it should work. Great. So I see some great examples.
I'm okay now. I've been able to get in.
It's working? Okay, great.
Yes.
So these are all great concepts. I think all of these would qualify as digital environmental assets. Land rights, change in socioeconomic data, claims of change in ecological state, bioacoustic data sets, carbon credits, biodiversity and water rights. There's a lot of different applications that the Guardian can be used for. It's quite flexible. And there's also regulations that are emerging that are drivers for people to create more environmental digital assets, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But I'm going to introduce here a little bit of a formal definition here. So as I've been studying the Guardian and have been onboarded myself and been really looking at the code base and looking how other organizations have been using the product, what I start to kind of come down to is, these digital environmental assets are units of value underpinned by nature, such as ecosystem services or measurable environmental outcomes that can be quantified, managed, and traded. And this is actually the intersection of three different domains. And I'll put this one over here. So, and that's why this is really so complex. Because we're talking about ecology, which is the science and how we measure things, governance, which are the rules, and economics, which is the market. And you can think of this moving in from the left of this diagram to the right. So we have nature, which we talked about a little bit. We talked about how it can be valued. And this we can think about as like the underlying asset. And I'll talk about stocks and flows in a moment. But what science is here to do is to look at nature and measure some outcome. There's some activity that has changed an outcome, and there's a lot of data that goes into that, right? To show that risk has been reduced in, let's say, a landscape, or that carbon has been sequestered in the soil, or that biodiversity uplift has been produced in an ecosystem. And once this measured outcome has been tracked and has reached, let's say, a certain threshold, we can convert this entire measured outcome into some tradable unit. And this tradable unit now can enter the Guardian or enter the system, and this now can represent that collection of measured outcome, right? So it's like if you reduce the risk by, let's say, a wildfire by 39%, you could, you measure that, you quantify it. Once it reaches that amount, and you've quantified all the activities that have gone into that change, you now have a tradable unit that now has financial value in the marketplace, which we could say, let's say an insurance provider might trade this risk reduction unit for a discount on your insurance premium. If this makes sense. So it's moving from left to right in this diagram. And what I want to point out also is there's something called called SIA, which is a UN system of environmental economic accounting, and it looks at things from, you have ecosystem assets, which have an extent, which is like how large they are, and the current condition that they're in, and these are the characteristics. And so this is the ecology side, looking at the underlying asset. This is the stock. And these all provide ecosystem services, which we may value. Sometimes we don't value them, but we have to place value on it and decide that we want to support it. And we receive these benefits from that in the economy and in society. And so the way SIA categorizes things, you have these stock accounts where you have ecosystem extent and ecosystem condition. And then you have flow accounts where it's tracking the changes. And these move from these physical accounts to monetary accounts. And eventually they become, similar to a bank account, really. But it's the trust in these assets. Like if there's anything downstream, like if we're looking at this and the measured outcome is not agreed upon, the science is not agreed on what it is, or there's different ways to measure things, then this digital environmental asset becomes questionable, right? If you can't audit what went into it and see all the history of who traded it and where it has been, right? The financial value becomes compromised. Right? And so the Guardian kind of does handle the entire life cycle of these digital assets. And to give a few examples here, and kind of a way of thinking about this, when we're creating one of these claims, right, we claim that some activity will produce some change in outcome. And so here's an example with like renewable energy. So here the ecology side is solar, wind, and hydro energy. And the change that we're measuring is clean energy. And the tradable asset then becomes renewable energy certificates. And the financial value is the scope 2. I'm going to pull these titles down so we can see them. And the financial value is the scope 2 emission reductions, which has a value in the marketplace, right? And sometimes regulations are there, with to encourage us or to incentivize reductions. And so the market places a financial value on this And so other examples are carbon credits, right? So on the nature side, we have photosynthesis capacity, and then the measured outcome is how much CO2 is sequestered. And then tradable units is these verified carbon units. And then the market has the price per ton. And in this, and in the blue here is pointing at what the Guardian does in each of these situations. So you get a unique identifier for, let's say, the forest or the organization that is owns or manages this forest. The verified credential is all the data that went into the measurement. Like if there was a satellite imagery that is measuring the carbon stocks or LiDAR, or if there are manual measurements that go into this, all that goes into the verified credential. And then once it reaches a certain level, you can tokenize this. And then if somebody purchases this, it can be traded and then eventually retired, in the marketplace. And so all of this can be handled across the Guardian. We could also look at another example like cocoa and climate smart commodities. Similar, you might have a smallholder agroforestry farm, and you're looking at the change in carbon intensity from one practice to another. And then you might have a digital product passport in this situation, which could fetch a market premium with new compliance regulations that are require now products in the EU to prove that their products didn't contribute to like deforestation, these kinds of things. Does anyone have any questions or comments about like this sort of framework here that I'm introducing, or this way of thinking? Does this make sense? How does this land for all of you? Tika, I think you're on mute, or I can't hear you. Or maybe somebody else can speak. Yeah.
So essentially, this enables digitization and then traceability in a way that was not previously possible. Is that? Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's traceable from the outset, and I'll get into like how the policy engine works in a moment, because this is I'm still just want to make sure we understand the concepts first before we get into the Guardian itself.
I like the format, Daniel. It helps to understand when you get to the Guardian how these elements flow from a life cycle perspective for each of the examples you gave, which are quite diverse in many ways, but they follow the same format. I guess one thing I would question on this is the continuation of analyzing the life cycle of each one of these. So is there an analytics lens that needs to be layered on this?
Yeah, that's actually, so there's a pretty comprehensive API. So when the tokens have been issued, you can query the API and you can look at, there's a lot of things you could build from this, as an open source platform, if somebody wants to visualize this, and that's what some companies are doing, like, they have their own product and service that they want to build, but they're using the Guardian as a kind of internal, management system for the policy workflow and the automation, so that, let's say, all the DMRV data goes into these verified credentials, and the minting happens for the tokens, the retirement happens just according to the workflow, which is that governance layer, right? So once you create the workflow engine, all that happens automatically. And so then you can query, if you want to do an audit and see like, okay, who owns the tokens, or maybe you're creating a bond or something like this, right? And you want to see you know, who has ownership over portions of the bond, where the funding is coming from, or how, what the current, you know, there's certain like auditing that needs to happen for regulatory and compliance purposes on a regular basis, and so these kinds of things can be queried from the Guardian. But it really depends on what the product is. Like, so those folks who are working like transparent supply chains, for example, they may need to see, you know, all the data and all the provenance, you know, as these commodities are moving through the supply chain and reaching the different jurisdictions that they're entering. So, yeah, studying all the different use case, because the Guardian's been built since 2021, so it's been around for quite some time, and just so many features have been built. The development team has really been heads down delivering features, and there are so many different use cases, so it's pretty interesting to look across them and find this sort of you know, the common threads.
Okay, so but I'm basically what you guys are doing is providing the platform, right? Because I see that you are talking about, you know, tokenization of the carbon credits. Well, that's we have heard about that for many years, and now we start to hear about the biodiversity credits. But for me, biodiversity credits is a much more complex situation, where the tokens that you are creating from the Amazon, how are you going to compare those with other, you know, biodiversity from the savanna or mangrove, etc.? So that's something that you guys are not defining. You are just providing the platform, right?
That's correct. You know, organizations might have to reconcile, like, you know, some, you know, things like carbon credits are fungible. Like one carbon credit represents a ton of carbon sequestered, but things like biodiversity credits, arguably they may be non-fungible, right? Every piece of the earth is unique. And if you're, you know, protecting biodiversity in one part of the world, it's hard to compare that with another part of the world. But these are open questions that the science is still out on. However, you know, as we think about, you know, what is the tradable unit, somebody can create, you know, some measured outcome. Let's say you're doing eDNA or bioacoustic sensors, these kinds of things, and you're measuring on a regular basis, and you see some change and uplift in biodiversity. And so now you want to issue a credit. So you issue this credit, maybe it's an NFT that represents some measured outcome, measured change in biodiversity. Now you have a tradable unit, and now you want to put this in the marketplace, and you need to now trade it or sell it or retire it, these kinds of things. And so now it moves from being a tradable unit with all of this eDNA records or bioacoustic records or land use interventions, and then you go into the marketplace to figure out how do you put a value on this, right? So yeah, the Guardian isn't prescribing how you do the science or how you define the events that create the tradable units, but you can define these within. So maybe it would make sense now to take a quick look at a couple visuals here just to understand. So I'm going to zoom in on the Guardian interface. I'm not gonna go and walk through the Guardian all the way, because it's a lot to look at. But I'm going to just point at the interface here of the policy workflow, the policy configurator, it's called. So if you follow me on the board, what you're looking at here is, so one of my onboarding tasks after joining is to author the VM 44, which is a biochar methodology. So Vera, the verified Vera, the voluntary carbon registry, has adopted the Guardian late last year, and so we've been in the process of digitizing many of the methodologies. So I've been working on VM 44, and this here you can see is a snapshot of the previous version of the policy, and you can see these are all workflow steps. So you can see things like it's calculating the ex post, or there's a calculation step that's happening here, and then you can look at there's like a JavaScript expression that's doing this calculation. It's sending the updates to different parts of the system. But you have all these different blocks that you can use. And so it's basically like a low code environment that allows you to encode what the policy looks like. And you have different users who might have access to different parts of this. So you might have like an admin, or you might have somebody who submits the project design document, and they may need to fill out certain information about their document or about their project, so that a calculation can run. And then after this calculation runs, somebody on the Vera side might need to look at it and approve it and look at the calculations. And then you have all these different events here, like, a token can be created or it can be transferred to another account, and these kinds of things. So it's quite there. And there's a bunch of documentation that explains what each of the blocks do. You can download this as a Docker image and run it and play with it to start to understand how it works. There's a lot of documentation that helps you get started with the policy configurator, and that's just one aspect, and that's that's this governance part that I mentioned.
Can you make smart contracts already?
You can, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this interacts with smart contracts, and so there's another. So while this is the engine that where you can define your policies, and then you can publish them, you can test them, you can validate them. I mean, there's just a lot here. You can put them into kind of like a dry run mode to understand like what it's actually doing with this post issuance workflows. There's also an indexer, and this is an example that someone in our ecosystem has developed, and this was around the methodology for metered and measured energy cooking devices, which is a gold standard methodology. And so here what you're looking at is, after this has already been authored in the Guardian, they built an indexer pulling data from the Guardian instance that they're working with. And this is just showing one project which has 3,254 monitored devices. It has this much tons of CO2 emissions reduction. And to look at, here I kind of expanded or looked at the trust chain that goes into this. So here you can see the expanded trust chain. So here's the verified monitoring report. This is the emission reductions. And then you can see all the these IoT devices that are measuring on a regular heartbeat. All of this data, and so you can see it all bundled in here, over 3,000 records that go into this trust chain. And so this is what allows you to kind of trade this asset, and then you can audit it right away. You can look at it, you can see what's inside, and while like one or two record, this is what really creates the trust in this environmental asset, digital environmental asset. So in your example, Eduardo, you mentioned having these kind of MRV sensors and these kinds of things, and you could actually append all this data into a project, and then somebody could inspect it and see it, and it moves around together with this tradable asset. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm curious, and I don't know if that is the next step, is how do you connect it with the wildfire section?
Yeah, this is a good segue into that. So jumping to wildfire, so just a little bit of a story. Last. I guess it was about 2 months ago now, I attended this event with Conservation X Labs, and they had about, I think, 12 organizations that participated. So it was like a 1-year challenge to spark ideas around wildfire And there was all kinds of interesting applications there. Things from like robotics, like robots that could, help put out a fire and reduce the risk to human lives. Like a drone, like a swarm of drones that could help detect and also help put out fires. What one company that's very interesting that I've been following for many years is Vibrant Planet, and they have two aspects to their company. They have both a public benefit corporation and a nonprofit that has a data commons, and the data commons has many different data sets that can be used to understand, fuel load. And it's probably best just to look at their website and inspect all the data sets, but it's used for it can be used for many different purposes. But one thing that their platform has is it helps you evaluate the risk, pre-treatment risk and post-treatment risk. So you can kind of go through and do these hypothetical interventions, right? To understand if we were to do these changes, how would the number of structures exposed to wildfire be decreased? So you can see that in this analytics here, they had 13,000 structures exposed to wildfires, and here reduced now to 5,000. And that there's more space, there's operational firefighting space. So there's more like thinning, or there's more space for firefighters to get in if there is a wildfire. So they're looking at how you can start to reduce risk within a certain jurisdiction and environment. And as I was looking at this, and so here's a nice visual, I guess, that can help you understand this better as well. So this comes from another document, or this academic document. So in California, we have this about 100 years of fire suppression, where the lands were managed in a different way in the past. And so without this kind of, like with fire suppression, without active management, what ends up happening is we have this risk of catastrophic wildfires where all the carbon stocks get just completely burned, these big mega fires. Whereas if we're doing like regular stewardship on the forests, then we're burning, doing prescribed burns, these kinds of things, and then thinning out the forest. Then if there is a fire, it doesn't reach up into the high canopy of the trees. And these are risk mitigation activities. But the question is, like, who's going to fund them, right? And this is an example of like what a dense forest looks like, and this is what a thinned forest looks like after being treated. So over time, you start to get to forest landscapes like this, where the trees are more spread out, and there's a lot less risk when you have this kind of situation. Now, insurers would prefer to see this, but the question is, like, who is willing to fund these mitigation activities? And their insurers have been moving out of California because of all the big fires that have been happening here. And this is happening across the world, right? And one of the examples that I came across was up in Tahoe, and Tika, you might have more to say about this, or you may be aware of it, but there's a new insurance policy that was developed at this Tahoe Donner community. It's a HOA, and they've been treating. They have a forestry management program that's been going on for, I think, maybe like 20 years or something like this. And this is the first time that an insurer was able to trade the risk mitigation activities for a very significant 39% lower premium and 89% lower deductible for their insurance. So they're doing this forest health management program which began in 1992. And sorry for the crows that are in the background here. But this insurance company, this is the first of its kind that is doing this. And this is actually, it's also parametric insurance, which means if there is a fire, based on the intensity of the fire, they will just pay out $2.5 million, I think, per, maybe that's the maximum, or maybe that's per acre. I don't remember. I think that's the maximum, $2.5 million. And it's not, they don't have to wait for, like claims to be processed. It just gets automatically issued. So it's a very quick. And parametric insurance also, there's no restriction on the use of funds. So once they get the money, they can use it to rebuild structures if they want to do other activities. There's no restrictions, because typically in insurance, it's very complex when the claims get issued and these kinds of things. And it can take sometimes years for people to access the money. And so as I started to look at this and study this space a little bit further, I started to think like, how might, and this is just an idea that came to me, and it would be amazing if somebody was interested to build something like this for anybody who's watching. You know, how might where'd the diagram go? Well, create something essentially of a fire ledger, you know, where you take a methodology to, you know, digitize a methodology such as though different kinds of treatments like prescribed burns, different kinds of activities, forest thinning, creating defensible space. And you could actually digitize that methodology and then issue tokens based on when these activities have happened. There are analytics that run, or data sets, you know, that could be pulled from Vibrant Planet just to kind of illustrate how it might work. And there's a lot of different actors involved, like there might be public and private finance, you know, blended. And how might we, you know, issue these funds so you have this record of all the different actions that go in, all the different mitigation activities that insurer can then look at, and then automate the way that the funds get released, you know, to the organizations that want to request these funds. You know, something along these lines is kind of like how I could see, you know, the Hedera Guardian helping with something like this. So, and one other thing, another participant at this hackathon that brought up something interesting. They had a product called CinderGuard, which is this flexible hose that can detect the temperature of the ground. Because there's an issue with prescribed burns, which is if you do a prescribed burn and it's not, you reignite and create a fire in and of itself. So the activity itself is risky. You need to have, you know, trained professionals to do this, but an insurance company might not even trust that, you know, trained organization really did put this fire out. Because imagine if you're doing a very large space, how do you know that it's completely out? There could be embers still smoldering, and if the weather changes and the wind blows, you know, a new wildfire could emerge. And so this company had this interesting concept of putting these kind of hoses down that can detect if there's a change in the ground, and issue a digital certificate of containment, which could then be this kind of, you know, this, you know, all this MRV could go into the Guardian, right, to show that, like, yes, this outcome really happened. The prescribed burn is really complete, it's safe, and we can move to the next step. So this is just a kind of concept that I think could be worthwhile to explore for those who are interested. So, does that help answer your question, Eduardo?
Oh yes, very, very much. And actually, let me just share a discussion I was having more or less a year ago. A year ago, I started to get interest on parametric insurance, as you mentioned, but related basically to carbon credit. And I started to discuss and follow some of the insurance companies, the new ones that are going to the carbon credit markets. And I was talking to somebody in Kita. Maybe you guys, I don't know if you know, Kita is KITA. It's based in, I think, in London. And when I was telling them about the concept of the green box with the real time or near real time, that resonates a lot with them. And actually, the question I got from them is, Eduardo, are you presenting the same to the other insurance companies? And I was really surprised, because she was telling me, I mean, are you really talking to my competitors? And what they would love to have is, in order to do a risk management properly, is that you have the proper infrastructure in the field that will help to do this type of risk management. So talking to them and showing this, and as you know, and engage them, that could be something that they will appreciate very much. And if you take the case of the US, every time that you, especially in the US, in Europe not always, but in the US, when you get an insurance for your house, most of the time you get a kit of different sensors that you need to put around the house. So here the idea would be, if you get an insurance, a contract for a major carbon credit deployment, well, you should be deploying a basic infrastructure that is going to help to manage that risk there. I mean, in this case, a fire. So
it's interesting concept. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are all great ideas. Well, we're just about out of time, and you know, just to close the conversation here, I'll bring us to this part of the board, and you know, the hackathon is running for a few more weeks, but as I said, I know the Guardian is quite a complex product. We just kind of scratched the surface here today. I'm here to help. If anybody is interested to try it out, you know, as a developer advocate, that's basically my role, to kind of work one-on-one with organizations that are interested, to help, you know, reduce the burden of implementation, help you think through how you might use the product, bring support, you know, as needed, yeah. And so I want to invite you, just you know, if anything excites you about the things you heard today, I'm curious to hear, you know, feel free to add those to the orange sticky notes here. And you can jump around here if you have any suggestions for others that you think might be interested in this. Any questions you might be left with, or insights and ideas that are emerging. All of these are great follow-ups.
Sorry, Daniel, I'm having some technical challenges getting across to that part of the board for some reason.
Oh, if you click on my icon, it'll take you right to where we are. Does that work? The bottom of the screen.
Oh, there we go. I got it.
Carolyn, do you want to say a little bit more about this automation aspects and how funds can be released in a short time after the incidents?
Yeah, when you are giving the example about the wildfires and the insurance company, that it took a really short time for them to release the funds. So I'm feeling that it's something good, because I was listening to this and I was wondering how the use cases can be different. For instance, for my communities, apart from wildfires, they experience droughts or floods, and how you can have, you know, faster payouts, especially if you've insured. So like, I'm really excited about the aspect of this trust in the system. And so by the time they are told you can release the funds, it takes a really short time, which is really important for communities because sometimes they have to wait really long before they can access support. So I'm excited about how the process helps reduce the time because it has trust embedded in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really good point, I think, and one of the value propositions of this kind of system, right? Because it's auditable and because the trust is built all these trust layers that are going along the way. It's not something that someone has to look back at all the data and pull it from different spreadsheets or different kinds of systems, right? It's integrating everything together, so that it can be quick. Right? Yeah. Yeah, and I see this insurance companies involved in gardening activities. Yeah, this is I'm still learning about. There's so many different stakeholders for the Guardian. I mean, it's I'm still tracking new organizations that are working with it today because it is open source, and we're going through a bit of a reboot. Around we just released version 3.5, and we're gonna re-engage the community in new ways. Going forward, so I'm really excited to see, and start to talk with other organizations working with insurance companies. It seems like a really powerful use case, especially when you have many different actors. This seems like to be a powerful value proposition for the Guardian. So, does anyone say anything in closing before we sign off? I know we're just a few minutes over.
Oh, hi, Daniel. Wow. Thanks so much for what you've shared, right? Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for an insightful session. And we're also really appreciate the wonderful collaboration our developers demonstrated live during the workshop. And it had tremendous value for everyone watching this. We showcase your work on Neuron. So I just have a few questions here. We have received it from our participants here live.
Sure.
Let me flash it on the screen. He asked for a project in Hedera Guardian. Do we really need third-party validators, or can community-verified MRV to be trusted enough for ESG claims and trading locally?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that really depends on the governance side, right? So it's totally valid to have a community verified MRV. If your local community, if the market will trust that, right? It really depends on what stage of the asset is going to be, right? So.
Got it. Thank you for that. And then, apart from that, I think I have informed you that we have received a couple of questions before this session itself. So I will be pasting it here on the live chat. Here we go. All right. As Web3 creative economies grow, what on-chain sustainability metrics or standards should NFT publishing platforms adopt to demonstrate environmental responsibility to regulators and mainstream users?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what market you're going after, or what, because there's a lot of really specific standards and regulations emerging. Like one example is like the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is a tool introduced by the EU to put a fair price on carbon emitted during the production of carbon intensive goods. So this is a regulation. And so, as these regulations come into place, and if you start to look around the sustainability landscape, you'll start to see how this is emerging. Things are moving from voluntary disclosures to mandatory reporting requirements. And as this gets introduced in things like supply chains, right, like goods and services, goods won't be able to be sold in the EU if they're not able to comply with this. Right? So these are like as an NFT, right? You could have one possibility for a developer to think about, right, is to have an NFT that represents some quantity of some environmental, like change in environmental state, right? an amount of carbon emitted during the production of the product, right? So the NFT can, it's in the design process really, and the workflow to think about like which one you want to go after and what you want to develop. There are a couple different companies, like you could look at NSET is one of the organizations, NSET.io. That's very interesting for climate smart commodities, and also Star Network, I think it is. Yeah. So I can put this in the chat. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we can have reference. Are you going to put it on the private chat, Daniel, so I can copy it for our participants?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Sure, let's wait for Daniel to do that. But before I give the last question of the live chat, if you have any questions for our participants here and our viewers, you can send your question using this form. Once again, I'll be pasting a form here so that I know that Guardian, as mentioned, it is quite a complex tool, right? But then again, Daniel has helped us make it sound easier. And let's not waste that. So if you have any questions, you want to be mentored further, please put your questions here, or the easiest way to connect with Daniel is, of course, to connect us via Hedera Discord. And then you can just tag Apex Mentors or Apex Non-Technical Mentors, that's us. And then we will help you connect with him. Definitely he will answer you. Just in case I receive a question here on the form, I will be emailing you with his answer. So please feel free to put it here on the form. All right, kindly hold on. Daniel has provided us with the reference link. Okay, I've been pasting it here. There's one more. All right. Okay, now you can go to the reference that I've just pasted on the chat for your resource. Okay, next, this would be my last question. I'll be pasting here again. And here we go. Hedera positions itself as the most sustainable public ledger. How can this be tokenized or made tangible for end users, creators, and readers on platforms like Kiva, so sustainability become a feature they actively value, and not just a background claim?
That's an interesting concept. Yeah, I think if you can, I've seen this other blockchains try and attempt to quantify the electricity use or energy use for the for all the tokens that are being transferred, and so this can be difficult to measure. I'm not sure. It's something I can bring up with some of our developers, but if you could look at how much energy went into the minting, let's say, of some of these goods and services that creators are developing. I'm not familiar with the Kiva platform, so you could start to kind of move that asset around with your goods and services. That's one way to think about it. But a lot of times, it's again, it's something. Given that framework that I talked about earlier, there's some measurement that you're doing. Right, and that's like the energy usage or reduction in energy usage compared to, let's say, another blockchain like Bitcoin, which is very energy intensive. So you could compare the two, and then you can create this tradable asset, which would be the NFT. But then, does the marketplace actually value that, right? And that's a question to kind of start to engage your users, your creators and readers, for example, your end users, and see if it's something that they're willing to pay a premium for, or if they're willing to work with your product versus another if it's considerably less, right?
Great. Okay, thanks so much for that, Daniel. And for participants, if you're interested in participating in the main sustainability track for Hedera Apex Hackathon, just scan the QR code that you can see on your screen. I don't know where it is on your screen right now, but you will only see one QR code. So please scan that, and then that will get you to the hackathon page straight. And here is a little tip from the organizing team, us. Do you know that not many participants submit for sustainability? So this is a great track to explore if you want your work to stand out and get noticed. Okay, now, Daniel, would you want to see any closing remarks to our participants?
Yeah, I just want to thank you both, Karen and Carolyn. Thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah. Yes, this is really the first time that we have collaborators live on screen, which is really wonderful and really made this workshop unique. Thanks so much, Daniel, for doing that. And thank you so much for our collaborators for your time. I know it's quite early for some of you, but then you're here, you showed up. Thank you. Yeah, so before we end this session, I'd like to invite you to watch another live workshop tackling EVM by Hedera of Hashgraph on March 6th. That's Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And I'll be pasting our reference here. Yeah, you can just save it on your phone. You can follow Hedera on YouTube so that you can get the notifications live, right? Okay, now a quick reminder as well. This week is full of workshops, as this will be the last week for us to blast with lessons and learning opportunities to our participants like you. So please head to Discord of Hedera, join, and you will not miss any important details and announcement. Yeah, this is the last week that we will have the blast of this workshop, but our hackathon will last until March 23rd. We just want to give you more time after the workshops. We want to give you more time to build, to get mentorship if you need it on Discord. So we have an ample time before the submission ends. All right, so this is my closing remark for everyone. Keep showing up, keep building, and here's to making big waves at the Apex Hackathon. Have a good one, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, Sherlyn.